just get fucking started. Once you get started, you learn very quickly how to grow a business from an idea to a business to a successful business. People think that you have to have this innovative, new, deep tech idea that's something so unique and different. No, you just have to see a business in one category, an industry that's working, and then apply it to a different industry, or sometimes just a different geography.
You said you raised $25 million. How?
A lot of the relationships I built with investors were built way before they actually invested. More people does not mean more output. I didn't sleep for 3 months, and I was just doing investor call after investor call after investor call.
How did becoming a dad change your relationship with business and work?
So my non-negotiables are like, I have to be home to put my son to bed. We're a lean team of 3 right now, and I'm moving faster than I moved with a team of 25 people in my previous company. I've definitely failed far more times than I've been successful in many different other businesses. I went from Ireland, very white Catholic surrounding and community, to like the middle of New York City, where it's the most diverse community in the world.
But right now you're doing something that is revolutionizing the personal branding space.
Marketing in general, return on investment has gone through the floor, meaning it's more expensive than ever to acquire new customers. I just realized there's this huge market opportunity in LinkedIn creators and influencers. And I was like, oh my God, that's like the best growth mechanism I've ever seen.
Hello, David Walsh.
Hi, Shoaib.
This is so exciting. For any listeners, welcome to episode 3 of season 2 of Rebels. I'm so fucking excited to have you as a guest. We've got so much to talk about. Not only as somebody with 3 successful businesses who's raised millions of dollars in capital, but right now you're doing something that is revolutionizing the personal branding space. So I really want to get onto that. But before we do, just give listeners a little intro into kind of who you are, your business, and what you're solving.
Yeah, well, firstly, so excited to be here. I'm only in London for a few days, and so I'm happy that we got a chance to meet up. So yeah, my name's David Walsh. I'm the CEO and founder of Limelight, and I've been in B2B tech for close to 10 years. Started as a sales rep, and then worked my way into branding and marketing, and then launched a couple of companies. I actually started with a watch company that went pretty well, that we ended up selling to a buyer in San Francisco, and then a HR software company that I scaled for over 4 years. Took some time off, and then midway through last year, decided I was ready to get back on the horse and build something again. So initially started as a referral software, started posting content on LinkedIn every day to raise awareness for the brand, the company, and hopefully attract investors and other customers. And then I just realized there's this huge market opportunity in LinkedIn creators and influencers, like content creators who typically have a specialist like niche that they're really in, like they've been building their audience for a couple of years by writing content. And I just became so aware of this industry and realized that there has to be a product that can institutionalize it and that can bring some transparency and make it more convenient for brands to be able to partner with creators and creators to be able to find the right brand partnerships. And so we launched Limelight, and it's been so exciting to see it kind of grow and get to meet people like yourself and sit in calls and conversations like this. So really excited to be here, excited for the conversation. I know that we have a lot to chat about.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, but before we get into Limelight, I want to like rewind a little bit. Where did your career like start? How did you get into entrepreneurship? Do you have like family who were into business, or what was that like?
You know, I don't. I have maybe a couple of family members, extended family members that might have done their own thing. But for the most part, my dad was an accountant. My brother was an accountant. I was fascinated in business from like a really young age. I just remember being so interested in like how to grow businesses and how to build businesses. So I went to college and did a commerce degree, which was very broad. So I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just knew I didn't want to be an accountant like my dad. So, I ended up doing commerce and loved it, got exposure to lots of different businesses. And then honestly, like, so we've talked about this once or twice maybe in the past, but I actually started as a sales rep. I decided that like my experience and my skill set was very like accustomed to building rapport easily and quickly with individuals. And so I decided that I wanted to go into like tech sales. And so that's where I initially started in tech sales and got some exposure to like training around how do you sell to people and how do you kind of communicate with individuals and work in a fast-paced company culture. So initially started in sales, and then ended up on a mad journey in the United States, kind of scaling from sales rep to then internal entrepreneur at a big tech company to then running a software company, the go-to-market strategy for a startup that was entering the United States and needed somebody on the ground, to then launching my own e-commerce business, and then kind of transitioned back into launching a tech venture, which was my HR software company. So there's so many different parts to that I could kind of go into detail into. But I would just say didn't really know what I wanted to do, just wanted to get into business from an early age.
Yeah, it sounds like you've been busy.
Yeah, it's busy. Yeah.
So you're originally from Ireland, whereabouts?
From Dublin. Yeah, from Dublin, born and raised.
And so now you're living in the US. So when did you move, and what was the reason for that move?
Yeah, so I initially went over on a student visa for 3 months. So part of education in Ireland, and once you get a college degree, you can get a J1 visa. And so I wanted to go explore. My college degree was 3 years, not 4 like my friends.
Yeah.
So I moved to New York, went to the Hamptons. Some people might know that name. Went to East Hampton and worked in restaurants and bars for 3 months, and absolutely loved it, and decided that I wanted to move to the United States when I finished college. So I went back, finished my 3rd year in college, and then I got a 12-month student visa to move to the US. I initially moved over to the US with the intention to stay for 1 year, and I had 4 student visas over a period of 5 or 6 years, and I ended up staying there. I've been there now 10 years. So I spent 5 years in New York and then 5 years in LA. And so, yeah, I always think we're eventually going to move home, but right now LA is home.
And what about the US in particular, and the kind of business landscape, entrepreneurial landscape there? What makes it so different and special?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think like 2 main things from an entrepreneurial or early stage venture perspective. I think the United States is very pro entrepreneurship, very pro venture. If you go, the story I would tell is like you go explain a business solution or business problem and like a solution that you might have to somebody in Europe, they'll tell you all the problems and challenges with launching that. If you go and tell somebody in America, here's what I want to do, they'll tell you all of the opportunity. So it's just quite a different mindset shift, I think, from, you know, that perspective. And then culturally, I just loved it. I went from Ireland, like very, you know, white Catholic surrounding and community to like the middle of New York City, where it's the most diverse community in the world. So that was the initial like culture shock. Oh my God, there's such a big world out there I haven't explored yet. So spent a bit of time in New York and honestly loved the place. Pros and cons to LA versus New York, but you know, happy where I am right now.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I've worked with quite a few US clients, and they always say like the difference is in the US, like failure is like celebrated. Like if you're failing, you're doing something, you're taking that risk. In the UK, like if you fail at something, it's like the end of the world. But even if you're doing really well, like it's like, oh, you can't talk about your success. Like, oh, that feels uncomfortable for people. Like the US must be so different. I've never actually been. I've never been to the US.
Right. Well, I think like failure is learning, and you learn that really quickly in the United States. Like it's so much more normalized to be able to try something unique and different and not get ridiculed for it. And even if you fail, you're still put on a pedestal of at least you tried. Yeah. Whereas I think in maybe Ireland specifically, I don't know about the UK, but Ireland specifically, you're a little bit more reserved, a little bit more constrained, and people will tell you some of the challenges you might face when you're launching a business, and failures aren't, you know, seen as like great things, whereas I think it's just a bit of a cultural difference, you know? And so, yeah, it's everywhere is slightly different, and I think like learning through failure is like a huge important part of being an entrepreneur, if I'm honest with you.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I've definitely failed far more times than I've been successful, and many different other businesses along the way, or business ideas that didn't get off the ground.
What would you say is like one moment of failure that stands out that you then actually learned something incredibly valuable from?
Jeez, you're asking me a tough question. That's honestly, there's so many that come to mind. I'd say the first one that comes to mind is, you know, every single job that you have is at risk, right? Like, I don't think if you're not the boss or the employee, or if you're an employee of a business and you're not the like executive team or founder, your job can be at risk. So for example, I've been fired twice, you know, in my career. Once was because the company was relocating and downsizing in the United States, so I had to transition out of the business. And then once was because of a visa reason. And so that experience of being let go twice from companies for reasons that were out of my control was something that I learned like an incredible amount from. And so, yeah, I think like the learning I have is that you're not always in control of your destiny, and you just got to take everything with a pinch of salt, and things happen for a reason, and some things will go well, some things will go not as planned, and you know, that's okay.
What advice would you give to somebody who's just kind of starting out and is currently listening to this podcast and is going through that like failure or that moment of shit, like things are going wrong?
Yeah, so get used to it is the first thing, because like it's always going to go wrong. It's going to go wrong 9 times out of 10, and then the 10th time it goes right, and you're like seen as the genius that saw it all beforehand, but actually nobody sees the struggles behind the scenes, you know. So my advice to like people that are early stage thinking about doing something is just get up and fucking do it. Like the more people talk about ideas and don't execute and don't have a, you know, strategy, they just tell you lots of, you know, potential ideas and then don't execute. That's a huge challenge. Like I think that's the one thing, if I was to go and educate people or spend time like with a group of people trying to help entrepreneurs, I would spend all of my time saying, just get fucking started. Because once you get started, you learn very quickly how to grow a business from an idea to a business to a business to a successful business. Those are two different learning curves, right? From taking an idea to a business, then having a business and making it successful are two quite different step adjustments. So my advice is like, get started early. Get started fast. Don't think about perfection. Like really, like perfection is not the goal. It's actually all about focusing on like, how can I learn as quickly as possible? So start quickly, learn quickly, find people that know how to build business or that are interesting in your space and go speak with them. So yeah, the last thing I would just say is like, focus on what's the pain point you're trying to solve and for who, and then go speak to those people non-stop until you collect enough information and data that you can make an educated assumption on what your hypotheses of their solution should be or your solution for them should be, that you can solve a pain point that's big enough for them to care. So yeah, I think like get started early, go speak with your users, and you know, don't be afraid to fail and look kind of strange or different for doing something unique.
Yeah, so with Limelight, which is your current business, you're essentially helping creators get paid for their content and brands take advantage and leverage the huge amount of B2B creators out there to blow up their own marketing, which is like so interesting because in the last 2 years on LinkedIn, especially on that platform, the organic reach for content creators has just absolutely skyrocketed, and you're kind of like filling the gap. Traditionally, there'd be like, you know, influencer managers or content managers, maybe on Instagram or other platforms, which would take like a big cut of the creators' pay. But what you're doing essentially is saying to creators, like, you can go on this platform for free, and brands can reach out to you, or you can reach out to brands and get paid with more authentic partnerships. Like, firstly, the concept is genius, but your strategy behind going to market quick, like, talk us through the process of like timescales. When did you have the idea? When did you kind of launch it, and how's it going? Because I think it's like incredibly fast.
Yeah, well, you said it was a genius idea. I actually don't think it's that smart of an idea. I actually think it's just replicating an idea in a different industry and then launching it in this industry, which I think for the most part is most companies. Like, people think that you have to have this innovative, new, deep tech idea that's something so unique and different. No, you just have to see a business in one category, an industry that's working, and then apply it to a different industry, or sometimes just a different geography, right? A different area where it hasn't been served yet. So to tie that to what we're doing, B2C influencer marketing has been around for years, right? 5 to 10 years. People have been posting pictures on Instagram with huge followings and selling sunglasses, and it makes sense for the brand because they sell 500 sunglasses with a conversion rate of 0.5% or whatever it might be. So I don't think anything is unique or different in this sense. Now, the industry that we're in, B2B influencer, is unique and different in the sense that like the business model is literally the same, but like the nuances are quite different. Meaning not every creator wants to partner with different brands consistently, because sometimes it's seen as like a negative if they're posting too much about certain products. So there's just some challenges and nuances to finding the right balance. So yeah, to go back to your question, which is like, when do we start? How's it going? As I mentioned it earlier, but like I initially started with an idea for referral software for businesses. I said that, and I launched referral programs at previous companies multiple times. So I was in charge of multi-million-dollar marketing budgets and decided, okay, well, my internal user base can be a great growth marketer. How can I get user stories from our current users and then amplify them and use them to attract new users? So when I launched Limelight, it was initially called Bundle. It was a referral software for other businesses. And then went out to market, raised investment capital through that process, and started posting content on LinkedIn. So about Q3 of 2023, so you could call it about a year ago now, or just close to a year ago, went out to market, posted content on LinkedIn every day with not the intention of launching a B2B influencer product, and then just became so immersed and exposed to this market opportunity, which, you know, if I had to categorize it, I would say like there's a couple of tailwinds as to why it's the right time for B2B influencer marketing. Number one, people want to follow people. People do not want to follow a brand. Corporations posting jargon and corporate content on LinkedIn performs terribly. Individual companies or companies have now advocated and say, okay, there's spokespeople within the company who publish content. Let's amplify them. So people want to follow people. Corporations are realizing that. Marketing in general, return on investment has gone through the floor, meaning it's more expensive than ever to acquire new customers. It's about, I think it's about 15% year over year customer acquisition costs are increasing. So it's costing you 15% more every single year to acquire the same customer. And then you have to go and compete with all of the major players in your industry because you're, you know, on the other social advertising platforms where other companies are, you know, paying more for the AdWords or for the keywords above yours. So there's a lot of reasons as to why people are now and companies are now interested in potentially other, you know, secondary or I suppose, channels that they haven't used before. One of them being influencer marketing, because they're starting to see this rise of content creators posting content every single day, people following them, building an audience, having a niche, having a say, having like trust in their industry and their niche. And I just said like, okay, today I looked at a company like Gong, and I said, Gong, the sales software, which some of our viewers might know, they hired all of these amazing sales reps with over 25,000 followers on LinkedIn and got them to post content every single day. And I was like, oh my God, that's like the best growth mechanism I've ever seen for scaling your network as a brand and company. And I said, well, what if in the future you didn't have to hire those people to acquire their audiences? What if you could just partner with them? So that's how it started. I said, okay, influencer marketing is interesting. B2B creators have a reach. Why not try build something that brands can partner with them in a more authentic and convenient way? And so that's how it initially started. And I think like behind the scenes, I'm just really interested in getting as many users to use the product to then figure it out along the way. And I think inherently in the business that we've launched, which is B2B influencer marketing, we're getting the boost on brand awareness of all the creators who are using our product as salespeople themselves, bringing brands and bringing other creators to the product. So it's naturally inherent. There's a virality component to the business model, which is really important because we're trying to scale a marketplace, and marketplaces are really challenging. When you have an inherent virality on one side of the marketplace, it makes it easier and convenient. So went into a bit of technicalities there, but hopefully it's helpful.
No, that's amazing. So talk to me about your team, because that sounds like a lot of work, a lot of research, a lot of finding product market fit. What's kind of your team organizational setup?
So I'll start with saying I am like, if I had one strength in the world, I think I'm universally able to understand lots of different business components of a business, but I'm not a specialist or an expert in one field. Maybe sales and maybe branding. But for the most part, my core strength in the team that I ran at my last company, which I hired over 100 people for, would always say that David's one superpower is recruiting people and finding talent. And I think that's a really important characteristic as an entrepreneur or as any business manager or leader, being able to find talent and get them to work with you and be able to scale and get and empower them. So last company I scaled pretty aggressively and got to like a pretty good headcount. This company, I'm like the opposite. I'm like, how do we keep this team as small as possible for as long as possible and find the absolute best people at their job? So to answer your question, there's a team of 3 of us today. I'm in charge of sales, marketing, operations, finance. I have a designer who's 23. His name is Demir. He is the best, most talented individual for his age that I've ever worked with in my life. His ability to take an idea that I might have or idea he might have and take it in, build it into a product is incredible. And then I have a CTO who's my co-founder, whose name is Young Jay. So Demir is our designer, Young Jay is our CTO. Young Jay's 25 years experience in software development, was ranked top 1% at Uber at his time there when he was there for 7 years, and he's been a CTO of 2 previous startup companies. So like to back it all the way back to one of your first questions, which was like, what do you advise other founders to do? It's really hard to find exceptional talent early on and get them and convince them to join you and launch a company, because not many people want to do that. So you have to be able to find the right people who are willing to take the risk, that have some level of experience, then empower them to be able to grow the business with you. And so, yeah, we're a lean team of 3 right now, and I'm moving faster than I moved with a team of 25 people in my previous company.
That is so interesting. I feel like agility is now becoming way more kind of chased within companies. And even when I started my business, there was me and then another 2 people. So yeah, also like a team of 3. And I find just that the lean business model just works for me. It's less columns, there's less kind of bureaucracy, there's less red tape, there's less, feedback loops or people to go through or hoops to jump through. So what would you say to somebody else who's potentially starting a business? Like, what are the key benefits for you that you found of having a smaller, tighter team?
Yeah, it starts with communication, right? Like there becomes a line as when you have a certain amount of people in an organization, that communication is really challenging because everyone's doing everything in different directions. And so having a small team, like the number one thing is everyone is aware immediately of what you're working on and what's like the most business priority. Once you scale past, let's call it 10 people, maybe a bit more, it becomes really a game of like communication, like how do we communicate more frequently about all the different initiatives that are running. And that's about building a scalable like operating model. So I think like small teams are more efficient. You're able to make decisions faster, you're able to communicate faster. A lot of the times like there's only one person doing the role, not multiple people that need to be involved. So like at a certain stage you need to create like a racy model, or like who's responsible, who's accountable, and who's informed as once you get to a certain scale, and there's lots of different people doing lots of different things. At the smaller team, it's so much more convenient and quicker and less stressful, to be honest. Like our burn is so low right now that I'm like in awe. I'm like, oh oh my God, how do I keep this as low as possible until we've really proven product market fit? So I'm a big advocate for smaller teams. It's less stressful, move faster, make decisions quicker, and communication is easier.
Mm-hmm. What's your kind of like management style then of that? Because if there's fewer people, then there's kind of more accountability and responsibility on those fewer people to perform at an optimal level.
Yeah.
So as the founder, how do you set those expectations?
Oh my God, I could go on for days, so I'll try to keep this relatively concise. But I would just say, like, number one, as a manager, you have to manage different people different ways. And you don't realize that until you find, like, you know, you've managed many, many different teams and many different types of individuals. What I look for in the early stages is somebody that has accountability, like, inherent within them, and they're taking initiative, like, very quickly before they need to be asked to do something. They're already doing it. And then, like, at the early stage, you try to find the people that are going to go above and beyond that you can just trust immediately. So at the beginning, you put in some level of structure and communication of what needs to get done and how you need to do it, and set the task and set the organization. But over time, very quickly, if they're good hires, they're going to gain your trust, like, immediately. Like, within a week of Demir, I was working with him. I worked with him, like, deeply on our investment due diligence material throughout the investment round. And within, like, 3 days, I was like, oh my God, I 100% convinced that this guy can do many different things. So you have to find the right people, empower them, and then allow them enough autonomy and freedom to make their own decisions. And then also, like, fail and make mistakes. Like, the quicker they understand that it's okay to make a mistake, as long as they're moving fast, the better. So those are just some ideas of how I would think about managing a team, but it starts with trust, empowerment, and then being okay with mistakes.
So are you like a kind of hybrid remote team, or do you have a specific base?
Yeah, so we're remote. Well, I would call it like remote/hybrid, because I've done remote, and we are trying to build a team in which we're fully remote all of the time. Yet I'm trying to hire people within a 2-hour radius of Los Angeles, so that every so often we can meet up in person and do strategy sessions. So, you know, I posted on LinkedIn about this, that I was having a remote team, and then somebody was like, actually, that's more of a hybrid team because you're meeting up every so often. So I would call it remote, but like with a preference to hire people that we can meet up with every so often to do strategy.
What are you finding are the benefits of having a remote team?
So I've worked remotely for 7 years now, which is kind of crazy to think about, right?
Yeah.
2 years before COVID happened, I think maybe 3, I was remote. As a CEO founder, I'm able to jump and context switch between meetings and like time block things really effectively, really efficiently, and able to move really fast. There's no wasted energy and time. So like the pros are moving fast, context switching. The cons are it's hard to build company culture and like get to know each other outside of work. So I very much focus on like the times that we do meet up, like half the day is spent doing some sort of social or activity where we get to know each other and that we're not just talking about business. And then I'm a devil for just like jumping straight into business when I jump onto a video call. So I try like, hey, like tell me about your weekend. No, not like in an inauthentic way, like actually tell me what you did. I'm really curious and interested.
Yeah.
So you have to be at a level of interest into the individual that isn't just, I need to extract value from you. Like in a remote setting, you need to get to know them as a human, and then, you know, over time be able to work together. You know, I think that builds trust and builds rapport. And so we know each other really, really well, I would say, as a team of 3 people within the first 3 months.
That's amazing. In past companies, previous companies, you were working in like much bigger teams.
Yeah.
What would you, so can we name the company that you were at?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mathison. Yeah.
Cool. So what was this, like the headcount of that team at the point that you were working
At the maximum point, we probably got to 75 people, which was quite a lot.
That's so different. That's such a big
Yeah.
jump from 75 people to 3 people.
And just to be clear, like we had teams in LA, so I'll start on the East Coast. We had New York, Boston, we had Florida, and then we had teams in Texas, team in San Francisco, team in LA. So like little hubs of people in major cities was for the most part how we structured the company. But the benefit was we were able to hire really quickly, hire the best talent, and like hire remotely. Scaling teams, you know, I would just say like more people does not mean more output. And, you know, we got to a point where I was like hiring team members and adding team members thinking it's going to solve all these problems, but actually was adding to the problem and complexity over making decisions and increasing the burn rate. So I've definitely managed teams of, you know, larger organizations and larger teams. Things I did well were hire really great managers, like people able to manage for me. So that you'll hire a team of managers that are able to like manage many team members. That makes it more convenient and easy, but made some mistakes and did some things really, really well.
So day to day, what kind of, do you have any hacks for anybody listening on around productivity, efficiency? Because this seems to be like a recurring trend as you're talking. And I'm somebody as well who wants to build a a very flexible lifestyle. I think a lot of Gen Z as well in general, like it's a very kind of upcoming trend. How do we build a lifestyle that works for us, you know, where work doesn't take over our lives and that we're able to do good, deep work efficiently and effectively?
Yeah. It's not perfect. I'll just say, like, you know, I've gone through stages where I've been hyper, what I would call like busy, and I was doing the wrong type of work. I was just doing all the administrative work and responding to things like immediately. Like my team would actually tell me that if you write to David on Slack, he'll respond within 10 seconds, no matter what I was doing at any time. So if I'm in a video meeting, I was just responding to stuff all the time. Now I've kind of matured and I'm like, okay, like that's not the good work I need to be doing as a leader. I need to time box, create time in my calendar that I'm like regimentally focused on a couple of key critical tasks that need to get done, mostly strategic tasks that take a bit more energy and time. So time boxing is one thing. Knowing how to delegate and like setting structure is really, really important. And then knowing what you want from your life too. Like I think I went through moments in my career where I was working, you know, 18 hours, you know, 12 to 18 hours a day for a few days in a row. And that was like burning me out, but I didn't have kids and I didn't have, you know, family around that I need to support all the time. And so over time, I've kind of optimized around what kind of quality of life do I need? How much free time do I need? So my non-negotiables are like, I have to be home to put my son to bed between 6 and 7:30. And most of the time that's perfectly fine. And then sometimes I'll get back a little late and then I might put him to bed and start working again in the evening. I try not work after a certain hour, like an hour to 2 hours before bed, because it's really hard for me to turn off, which I think is the case for many people. But sometimes you just want to get the work done and you're in a flow state and then you try to sleep and it's 2 a.m. So yeah, never perfect. Important to time box, important to look after yourself and do physical exercise regularly. I could probably go on and on and on, but that's probably the crux of what comes to mind.
A lot of female founders that I've spoken in the past always seem to get asked this question about parenthood and running a business. So I want to also ask you about this. How did becoming a dad change your relationship with business and work? And well, firstly, did it? And if so, how did it?
It's such a great question, Shoaib. So at the time that my son came was the busiest time in my software company ever. Right, he came at like the worst time you can think of. Meaning like when he was born, 2 months later, we went out to raise a Series A, which we raised $25 million in a Series A 2 months after he was born. I didn't sleep for 3 months. And I was just doing investor call after investor call after investor call. And this is as the market was starting to slide. So it was like really intense. But you know what the best thing ever was about that? Is that it like changed my mindset. I didn't need to be there all the time. I realized that me transitioning out of the business to go on parental leave, which I think I took 3 weeks maybe, actually was the forcing mechanism to realize I need to let go of things. I need to let go of this task and this task and this strategy. Like, so because my son came, it was stressful, but actually I realized that actually I was holding on to too many things, which is a very common thing for founders and entrepreneurs, especially first-time founders, where you are building stuff from scratch yourself, so you hold on to it for way too long. It's like you're holding your toys and you don't want to give them away. When you're forced to give them away because you have to take parental leave, you realize, oh my God, there's all these things I didn't need to do. So to answer your question, like when I came back after parental leave, it was like, oh my God, all of these tasks and responsibilities were now delegated, that things were happening that I didn't need to be there. So it was kind of a double-edged sword. There was part of it that was like really intense and, you know, I didn't get sleep, but the other part of it is I started to realize that like I needed to be more able to like hand over power and hand over control. So that's one aspect of it for sure.
Would you say you burnt out at some point?
Yeah, I definitely, and I didn't realize, like I was just soldiering on for ages, and it came in ebbs and flows, meaning, you know, I would be really hyper intense 1 minute and then like a few days later I'd be fine. And I'd be like, oh no, that's okay. That's just like a sprint. So I used to work in very intense sprints. But then, you know, it took me a while to really like realize just how burnt out I was of scaling my company for 4 years and 2 years before that scaling another company. And so, yeah, I definitely got burnt out. You know, I wouldn't say like, you know, I think if I had to categorize it, I would say like I was burnt out, but I knew that I needed a break and I took the break that I needed at the time that I needed to versus like waiting for too long. But yeah, definitely got burnt out once or twice and some bumps along the road.
You said you raised, was it $25 million?
Yeah.
And firstly, that's crazy. But secondly, how? Do you have any tips for anybody who's going through that? going through investment race?
Yeah, I mean, my mindset as a founder was very focused on building a subscription software business, which is very valuable when it grows and it's predictable. At the early stages, when I raised that capital, it was in like the high growth stage.
Yeah.
So the market was really hot, so valuations were quite high. So that number sounds crazy, but at the time it was relatively like it was normal but high. So I think like I think the question is like, how do you raise funds from investors? I think it all starts with storytelling and trust and your ability to execute. You have to build relationships with investors early on, have conversations, be able to tell stories as to why you're the right person, why it's the right time for this type of business, and be able to explain your vision of the future and build enough trust that people are willing to give you money. So at the early stages, you're meeting with angels who are typically individuals. Like, you know, if I was to write you a check for $10,000 to launch your company, I'm now an angel investor for $10,000 in your company. Then you get to the next tier, which is like when venture capitalists come along who are more funds and it's more institutionalized. And it all starts with like running in sprints, and it's like being stages. So at the beginning, you're just getting enough cash to prove your idea into a minimal viable product and get enough traction to get to the next stage of growth. And then you get to, you know, a seed round. You'll usually do a friends and family, which is angels, a pre-seed, which is typically angels, and then you'll do a seed round, and then a Series A, Series B, Series C, depending on how much cash you need to raise. So it's never perfect, but I think like it comes back to being able to tell your story, being able to storytell, and being able to then most importantly prove that you're able to execute at a level in which you should be investable. Meaning a lot of the relationships I built with investors were built way before they actually invested. And then they see you execute over time, and then you know you build up a trust, and they finally decide, okay, this is the right time for me to invest. Hopefully that answers your question. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it definitely does. But you mentioned something quite interesting about the storytelling element. And I think we've had this discussion earlier that so many businesses of the future and founders of the future are right now building audience and building following and engagement and creating a community of people who are already anticipating a product or a service coming along. And whereas in the past, you know, you might build your product first and then try to build an audience. It's almost like flipped. Do you see that continuing, and why do you think that's happening as somebody in the creator space?
So I fundamentally think that all founders in the future, at least one founder, it can be multiple founders in an organization, 1, 2, 3, 4 sometimes. I think at least one has to be a creator. They have to have the ability to write content on a regular basis to launch a company in the future over the next couple of years. And I think now why it's happening is that you're just seeing it more frequently. Founder brand has always been something. It's always been around, but it was always something that was like important maybe at the early stages and then kind of not as important later on. I think that like a founder being a spokesperson of a company is like, it's a must-have. If I was to write a check into any startup company today, I'd be like, okay, who's the creator? Who's the person that's going to be the spokesperson for the brand and create consistent content on a regular basis to be able to grow that audience? And what I would say is like, it's just about getting to like 1,000 great fans. Once you get to a certain scale of a community of 1,000 fans, you've grown enough that people will become aware of your business and your product. So I think like content writing as a founder is critically important today and will continuously be one of the main pillars of my investment strategy and probably a lot of other potential investors in thinking about investing into companies.
Yeah, no, it's so interesting because I've had the exact same experience. A lot of the founders, CEOs that I've worked with over the last 3 years, probably 100 plus, probably about 7 of them have launched businesses directly off the back of their personal brand, like brand new businesses that they never ever thought they'd launch. But now they've got this audience and you know, they've created stickiness around particular content pillars or content themes. And suddenly it's like, wow, there's an opportunity here to actually like monetize this audience as well. And the audience is so engaged and so behind the person, like you said, the trust has been built. So I think that's definitely interesting. And there's also so many more creators, and it's the industry that's moving so quickly. As somebody who runs a business in that space, how are you keeping up with like changes in algorithms, social media trends, changes in attitudes towards influencer marketing? Like, How are you navigating all of that?
Well, I mean, firstly, the influencer marketing like industry in general is changing dramatically. Like every single day and every month and every week, it like evolves. And so I think we're trying to stay ahead of the curve by just meeting with users and meeting with creators and brands, like specifically marketeers at businesses on a regular basis. And then we're compiling a lot of resources into our community resource channel where we're just seeing best practices. But the truth is you can't know until you're in it, right? Like until you're like living and breathing it. So we're trying to compile as much data and resources as possible that are like tips and tricks. But you know, it is an evolving industry, which honestly, Shoaib, like makes it most exciting. Like I would not want to be in an industry that's like stagnant and that's like years and years old. I feel like influencer marketing is just started. And I'm way late, like in comparison to you, right? So, you know, I get really interested when I meet with people who've been doing this for years and I'm like, how has this not existed? Like, why isn't this institutionalized as an industry more and more? And so I think that brand partnerships for creators will be a big revenue stream for creators in the future, fingers crossed. And I think that businesses will invest and increase budgets for this type of marketing on an ongoing basis. And I think that it will work. Like, why wouldn't it? Now, I would just say, Shoaib, like it has to be authentic.
Yeah.
Like we do not want a scenario in which people are posting about everything, you know, under the sun that they've never used in the past at all. So trying to build authentic content partnerships. And like maybe just last thing, like you might ask me like, what do I spend my time with brands talking about at the early stages of a partnership, for example? Like I spend most of my time educating them on giving the creative freedom to the creator. Like if you're going to do influencer marketing today, you have to give the creative freedom to the creator to write a story in which it makes sense for their audience. And a lot of the times in the past when brands started to try dip their toe into influencer marketing, they weren't willing to like hand over that power or control over the copywriting. And now I think that's changing because you're starting to realize it works. And the honest thing is that the creators know the algorithm. They know what resonates with their audience and how to tell a good story. So yeah, I spend a lot of time educating brands on like how to do good influencer marketing. And it starts with like partnering with the right creators that are trusted, that are verified on our platform, you know, most of the time, and then making sure that you give the creative freedom to the creator to write authentically.
Yeah, as a content creator and somebody who's creating content for others, I think that's so important.
Yeah.
Like ridiculously important.
Yeah.
I've worked, I didn't end up working with them, but some brands that reached out and were like, you know, we'd love for you to do a post like this. A couple actually had already written a post for me in very kind of company, like corporate jargon. And even like the graphic had their logo on and was in their like brand guidelines. And clearly someone in their design team had made sure every little pixel on the graphic. And I was just like, this is not going to work. This is not going to work. Like people are just going to smell this a mile off. Also, it just didn't match with my brand. So yeah, that authenticity I think is going to be increasingly important as it becomes more popular.
Yeah.
For creators to maintain. I think creators also have a responsibility to like speak up about that.
Can I jump in there, because I am in the unique position in which on my platform today I see hundreds of conversations between creators and brands, and I will tell you that creators are some of the most educational people you'll ever meet. Most of the time they're explaining to the brand, hey, no, actually I think it should go this way and this is my recommendation and suggestion. So a lot of the times the creator is actually educating the marketeer on how to do good content writing. And I think that's fascinating. Like, I think, imagine a world in which all brands end up having partnerships with many creators in which their creators are actually educating the brand on how to do marketing. Like, that's the future, in my opinion.
That's so exciting as well.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah,
it's such an evolving industry. It's like amazing. Can we rewind? Because I saw you do a post on LinkedIn talking about an experience that you had at Indeed when you worked there. And it's like a full circle moment that I think is really interesting. So do you want to just tell that story to the audience?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell it like the Cliff Notes version of it. So I went to New York and worked as a technology recruiter for 3 months, changed my resume on a platform, got reached out to by Indeed, and to join their US office in New York region as a sales rep. And so I said, okay, amazing opportunity. So I jumped on the opportunity. I ended up doing the interviews, did really well in the interviews, got the job, got hired as the first Irish person in the New York office, but was hired on a student visa. At my time there, I ended up doing really, really well. I was like top 1% like sales rep across 350 people across the US. They said it was my accent because, you know, I was Irish and I was able to get past the gatekeeper and build rapport easily. But I was just like working so hard and so efficiently, building systems and processes, which is for another conversation. But ultimately wanted to do something entrepreneurial. Like that was what I wanted to do. Incubator opportunity came around. I had written an online playbook to help other immigrants navigate the talent acquisition process on a student visa. And I'd shared it with a couple of hundred people in Ireland to try enter the US on a student visa. Realized that like there was an incubator opportunity, got to pitch a couple of different rounds of pitches to get to the CEO. And then if you pitched the CEO, he would either fund this entrepreneurship incubator project with 250K. And so I got to the final round, pitched the idea, got 250K to launch the internal business.
So you won it. So you won that.
Well, there was a couple of people. It wasn't just one person that won it. It was either you invested or not. I think there was like maybe 3 ideas that they invested in. And if you invested, you got to go to like Texas, Seattle, or one of their Asia offices to sit in an incubator hub and go do this project for 3 months. It was like my dream. I was like, oh my God, it's amazing. And just to give you context, the product was Indeed International, and the whole idea was I want to help Indeed's customers hire non-US citizens. And I think our customer base would be really interested in hiring international talent. So that was the thesis. Got funded. Unfortunately came out of the room really excited, and then got brought into another boardroom with the head of HR, the head of sales, the head of legal. And they were like, Dave, we actually have to do a background check with you because you were on a student visa. We didn't know that. And unfortunately, we have to let you go because you're working in a sales capacity and technicality. There was a technicality where if you're working in sales, it's seen as like replacing an American worker's job because it's not specialized enough. My background was in marketing, and this was sales. So apparently it wasn't directly connected. And so unfortunately got funded by the CEO and then got let go the same day. And honestly, like I was shocked, of course. I mostly didn't want to leave the friends that I had made, and obviously didn't get the opportunity to launch the internal business. But that was the most important thing that ever happened to me, because I woke up the next day being like, okay, I'm going to use this story to help tell us a future story to future investors to go launch this business eventually. And then fast forward, 3 years, I launched a business that was a HR software product that basically got investment because of that background and because of that story, and scaled that business up as we already talked about. And about 3 years into that business, Indeed's venture arm reached out, and I was like in shock. I was like, oh my God, this is the absolute full circle moment. They reached out and they said, hey, we're really interested in what you're doing. Would love to talk about potentially being involved in your next investment round. So I met with them, and it was just this weird full circle moment where I'd been let go for coming up with this idea, went out on my own, and then built the business, and then they wanted to invest. So yeah, full circle moment. Definitely I'm telling the really excited, positive aspects of it. There was definitely some challenges, but everything happens for a reason, and I fundamentally believe that. And so when you get knocked down, you get back up, and you're able to tell the story of why you got knocked down, and that can end up being the story that catapults your success.
Yeah, and that also it just ties into what you said about storytelling and the power of storytelling.
Right.
Like using that failure to then catapult you to like another league in terms of growth, which I absolutely love. I also want to just quickly ask about Limelight for people who are interested in like using the platform, because it sounds obviously super exciting, and I'm involved in Limelight and behind the scenes. So if I was a creator, if a creator's listening to this who posts on LinkedIn, has a newsletter, posts on X, has a podcast, how can they benefit and monetize through your platform? Yeah,
great question. So firstly, it's free for all creators, meaning you can come, create an account, and it is free. And we try to make it as convenient and easy to set up as possible. So it starts with setting up your storefront, which will give you examples of other storefronts. You just go to our website, limelighthq.com, and then you can go to the storefront section, and you can see some other versions of storefronts out there. We've got a pretty large base of customers now, brand side and creator side, who are giving us feedback on an ongoing basis, but it is free for creators. Come to the platform, sign up, and then you create your own storefront where you kind of include data and analytics on the different channels that you might have. It's okay to just have one channel, that's not a problem, but if you have multiple channels, you can include them as well. Once you've created your account, we make you visible in the database where brands can actually find you and partner with you, and then you can use your storefront as you wish. It's a publicly available URL that you can either put on your website or you can share it with brands when they reach out for partnership. And then finally, we've also built a brand database. So you can come and see live campaigns of brands that are willing to do partnerships with B2B creators and actually apply to work with them on their creator program. That's actually going really well. We launched it like 2 weeks ago, and I would say like it's been crazy to see how many great, amazing creators are applying to these brands. And then we're, notifying the brands, and they're like, oh my God, this is incredible. So that's just kicking off off right now. And I think if anyone's listening that's a creator, like sign up and apply to as many creator programs as you can.
Yeah, for sure. Because I see this, obviously, over the last 3 years, I've seen thousands of creators creating brilliant content, building authority in their field, but just struggling to monetize.
Right.
And creators out there, like, use the platform because you're just getting paid to do what you do, which is create content. So there's huge benefit. How many creators have signed up now?
Oh, we have about 2,000 on the database right now,
That's
which is kind of crazy to think about. And on the brand side, I think we have over 300, which is kind of cool. And it's growing, right? We're also building a referral product, which is on my to-do list, which is about this long. And it's been on my to-do list for like maybe 3 weeks. My team are getting so fed up that they just put referral into the UI, like it's now available, and I just have to go build it. And I'm like, oh, I really need to get to that now. So yeah, we're going to be, and the reason I mentioned that is that if as a creator, you introduce a brand to us, you can actually earn revenue from that brand as a referrer.
That's a passive income.
Yeah.
Love it. Love the fact that you're like democratizing, I guess, the industry and helping creators get paid, and it's free as well for creators to do.
Yeah.
So it's like win-win all round. We have a closing tradition on this podcast where I ask all our guests if they have an unpopular opinion or belief that potentially one day might cause a bit of a stir, could get them cancelled, who knows, that they're willing to share on camera, of course. Do you have any unpopular opinions or very strong opinions on any particular topics that might be treading kind of waters a little bit?
You might not. I hope you don't get me cancelled for this. I've thought about this a few times. I suppose like the number one thing that comes to mind for me with my personal experience is that investors are not helpful to your business for the most part. 9 times out of 10, investors offer no value whatsoever to your business other than the check that they write. And that's obviously super helpful because it gets you off the ground, especially if it's early stage and it's their money. That's incredibly like rewarding, and they should be rewarded for it. But for the most part, most investors offer no value whatsoever. They might tell you that they're super helpful and they can offer lots of introductions. But I've had scenarios where majority of investors are not helpful to a startup company. And then I've had the reverse, right? 20% of my investors are incredible. And they're often the people that you don't even think are going to be as helpful as the ones that say they're going to be helpful. So there's definitely scenarios, like shout out to some of my old investors, like super, super helpful in terms of introductions. But I would say the vast majority of investors are helpful for inputting capital, and that's about it.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. And also, I think you're our first international guest as well. That's the first for Rebels podcast. But yeah, thank you so much for being here.
Shoaib, that was amazing. Thank you for having me. Thanks for the conversation. Excited for the continuing and to collaborate with you. And yeah, hopefully we do one of these again soon.
100%. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to listen to Rebels podcast with me, Shoaib Ahmed. If you've been watching us on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you've been listening to us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, then please give us a 5-star rating and a follow. The more successful this podcast gets, the bigger and better guests we can have on in the future. Thank you.